I am Andrea Devin Bertoli, pleasure coach and sex educator. I am normally based in Hawaii, and with some other big news for some of my Bay Area babes, Christopher and I will be moving to Berkeley in January. So I'm looking for collaborators, event hosts, friends, and community to help celebrate sacred sexuality, kink, tantra, all those delicious things. So if you are Bay Area local, please look for real live in-person events starting hopefully as early as February as we settle in at the end of January. So for those of you new to my work, I like to think of myself as a Venn diagram of scientific, therapeutic, medically researched, and also esoteric, holistic, tantric wisdom. So we're really blending the scientific and the spiritual to have really beautiful, conscious, sacred sexual experiences, relationships, and so much more. So I teach workshops like this online. I teach occasionally in person in Hawaii, and again, soon to be in the Bay Area in Berkeley. And teaching is just my favorite thing to do in the whole world. I also have an online pleasure education platform. So if you can't make it to the in-person events and don't want to do more than just the once a month freebies, then I have a Patreon and you can check that out. I'll drop the link in just a minute. So one of the reasons I do these free events is to just meet new people, right? Introduce people to this work, help get you connected to my newsletter, to Patreon, to all the different wisdom and practices that I and we offer, and also to give this as a service offering to the community. These are free events. Christopher always volunteers his time to help me and co-host with me. So he's the one letting people in and managing all sorts of stuff. Very gracious and loving. And it's just a chance to get you stoked on these topics. We all have different access points to this work. Some of us might access it through reading or listening to podcasts. Some of us might access it by attending a class. Some of us might access it by having a partner who introduces us to these new ways of thinking and understanding sex and sexuality. So wherever you are, again, you are welcome. This class will introduce you and or add on to your existing knowledge of Tantra, mindfulness, what I would call conscious or sacred sexuality. And this is not a substitute for any individual coaching or therapy. My coaching practice and Christopher's therapy practice are very separate from these free events. So please take care of yourself. You are welcome to go video off. You're welcome to ask questions, and you're welcome to leave if that feels necessary too. And again, I'm going to drop some of my notes below so that just in case you have to leave early, you have some links. So I will drop these in the chat for you. Nope. One moment. Okay. So all my links are in there. Some of you know this, some of you don't. Social media is pretty heavily censored for those of us in the sexuality space. So it's pretty G-rated, and I don't post that much anymore, but all of the delicious stuff is hiding on Patreon. So I've introduced myself, and I want to be sure to take a moment to introduce Christopher as he'll be adding his wisdom and his practices into our conversation today.
Hi, y'all. I'm Christopher Brown. I'm a certified sex therapist through ASEC, which is the American Association of Sex Educators, Counselors, and Therapists. I've been a psychotherapist, a regular talk therapist for over 20 years and became the accidental sex therapist when a couple came into my practice. They didn't know each other. They didn't like each other very much, and they never had sex. They left my practice, best friends who never had sex. And I went, oh, shit. What have I missed? And it turns out I have missed an entire realm of human experience, and that is sex and sexuality for pleasure. So as we go through today, keep in mind we're all raised, and again, my career is a good example of the puritanical culture here in the West. So sexuality is institutionally, familially, and individually often, if not always, split off from other parts of life. So that can work for some people for whom it works. I'm thinking shout out to my asexual folks in the audience. But for people who want sex for pleasure versus sex for procreation or fertility, it's not a friendly environment out there, which is why what Andrea does is so important. So overall, we're talking about how to integrate sex for pleasure and eroticism for pleasure into your life, into your relationship, into yourself. So that is the overarching theme of today. And I will add a few perspectives here and there, both from my practice, but as a man in the world trying to integrate my own eroticism into my life, into my partnership. So, hi, it's nice to see all of you today. I hope you had a good holiday and thank you for being here and for being people who want more pleasure in their lives. That in and of itself makes you a bit of a rebel in a good way, and I'm so glad you're here.
All right, thanks, folks. I saw that there was a bunch of echo. I was muted, so I'm not sure how we can do that. Maybe I don't know, we'll work on it. I was muted, but I think, yeah, renegades all around. Yes, thank you, indeed. So again, thank you for working with us with our tech glitches. We're going to do the best that we can. All right. We'll see how that sounds in the post recording. We'll make it work. Okay. So we are going to talk about deeper eroticism for men. This could mean a lot of different things. We're going to talk about what the erotic is, as I understand it, and as we understand it and practice it. And we're going to give you some skills and practices that you can start today with yourself and or with your partner, your lovers, friends, maybe you have special friends. So these are all skills upon which you can build your practice, right? Just like if you were interested in yoga and you go to your first yoga class, like you're definitely going to get something out of the first class. Are you going to be like the most practiced yogi, in the class? Like maybe not. But as we start to understand sex differently, as we start to pay more attention to our bodies, and as we start to learn new ways of being in our own bodies, in our own self, we continually build these skills. I think of us as little rosebuds, right? That we unfurl a little bit and then we unfurl a little bit more and then we unfurl a little bit more. So the more we explore over here, the more we get to open up over here. And this to me is truly an unending process. Like there doesn't seem to be any end to this. In our nearly 3 years together, there seems to be this kind of constant erotic unfolding, partly because of who we are as humans, and partly because we have really dedicated our work and our time into this. Like, this is the thing that we are most excited about in the world. And so, this is something that I think about and talk about and read about and practice all the time. So I want you to know that, again, like no matter where you are on this path, there is so much within you as a lover. And because of puritanical culture, whether you grew up super religious or just growing up in this country or in other puritanical cultures, a lot of that has been hidden from us. We've been told we're not enough or too much, or that sex is bad or dirty or shameful. And a lot of us, for lots of good reasons, have had to hide or diminish our beautiful, innate sexual energy. So I want you to also know that not only is this energy in you and can be delicious and fun and playful, but it is also healing. And that's one of the big themes I want to explore today as we talk about deep eroticism for men. And as I was thinking about this class and writing other content around it, I want to acknowledge that myself and probably a bunch of other people on this call have experienced harm at the hands of men. And I have also been healed at the hands of men by lovers who are careful and deft with my body, who learn how to listen, who know how to hold space. Almost all of it has been with this guy sitting behind me, but there have been a few wonderful other people in my life who've offered sexuality as healing. And when you start to understand that sex is not just something to do, it's not something to check off the box, to like tick off the box, but it's actually a healing practice, then it can really fundamentally change not only how you approach sex with yourself and with your lovers, but it can fundamentally change who you are as a human. Like your sexuality is a gift. And especially in a post-Me Too culture that in many ways demonizes male sexuality, knowing that you have the power in you to be actually part of the healing from those of us, and again, it is nearly everyone I know, for those of us that have been harmed, like you have the power to become the masterful lover that can heal us. Like so many of my classes, this is an introduction to the type of stuff that we talk about. So if there's something that you have questions about, drop it into the chat, reach out to me, and ask all the questions that you want so that you can start to, again, find your own kind of intro into it. I also want to make a note about a concept that comes up a lot when we start to talk about sacred sexuality, and that is the kind of dualistic nature of the world. In Tantra and in Taoism, this is usually notated as masculine and feminine. A lot of people don't like that language for a lot of different reasons. So today, while we're talking about deeper eroticism for men and some of that masculine energy, I also want you to know that we can all embody this type of energy, no matter our sexual orientation or our gender expression or our physical bodies. So the phrase that the terms that actually we like to use a lot in our teaching is not so much masculine, feminine, because again, that can be polarizing for a lot of people. And because it has this gendered connotation, can be confusing for a lot of us. But directive and receptive are two terms that I want you to take note of today. So whether you are in a more directive role in your relationship, in your particular lovemaking scene, in your life, know that there is also this counterbalance of receptivity. Most of us, everybody I know, so men, women, and everybody else, have a really fucking hard time receiving. So being on the receptive end can be really hard for most of us. And we'll talk about that a little bit more when we get into the erotic embodiment skills. But just know that if you start to, if you continue or start to explore this path of tantric and Taoist and sacred sexuality, masculine, feminine is often what's used. In the tantric tradition, you might also hear Shiva and Shakti, which are the divine manifestations of spirit, which actually has nothing to do with gender. In Taoism and in Chinese medicine, it's yin and yang. So lots of different ways to think about these two energies, but the two that we love, directive, receptive. So as we talk about this today, what I'm really speaking about is this directive energy. How do you hold space for yourself, for your lovers? How do you create that kind of delicious polarity, right? Like the difference. I just saw some comments. Delicious season to receive. Yes. Love that. Thank you. So, as we start today, I want to first look at erotic embodiment. So I've taught, 3-month-long courses on this, and I've also taught very short workshops. So again, we'll do just like the little tasters of this. When I think of erotic embodiment, what that means to me. So embodiment, first of all, is kind of being in your body. And this is also kind of two sides of one coin. So as a lover, I want to be embodied. I want to feel my breath, my skin, my sensation, my pleasure, my turn on. And I want to be able to face outward and attune to my partner. Where is his turn on, arousal? How is his body, sensation, pleasure, right? So embodiment and attunement are two of the other kind of key phrases that we'll think about today. And these are also in counterbalance. We can't only be in ourselves and we can't only be in the other to have a really satisfying lovemaking experience. We really need to juxtapose the two. So when we think about erotic embodiment, it's really embracing our whole sexual and sensual selves and making space for all of that within us. Sometimes our eroticism is tied up with really big emotion. Sometimes it when we start to explore our erotic selves, it might unleash some anger that's been repressed. It might unleash some trauma that we weren't aware of. So again, back to this idea of sex as healing, right? When I first started this work, I really thought Tantra practice and Tantra expression was going to be like sex and rainbows and unicorns and just orgasms all day. And in fact, I spent like a lot of the first couple years of practice just like sobbing hysterically, because as I started to feel safer and more open, I would open more, and as I opened more, more shit came out, and as I opened more stuff came out, right? So just know that the erotic is not just orgasms and unicorns and rainbows. It is all of you. It is this awareness of all of your sensation, all of your feeling and emotion, its presence, and it's also being in that and being in your sexual energy. The other really key component to erotic embodiment is not making others responsible for your sexual energy, not making others beholden to your desires, right? So as we think about being erotically embodied, I want you to imagine that you are your own erotic being in this moment, and nobody else is responsible for that, whether you are super, super turned on or whether you are feeling like a little bit of an ebb in your sexual energy and not feeling very sexual. Nobody is responsible to turn that back on, and nobody is responsible for helping you manage your desire that feels really high. We can talk a little bit more about nuance within that, right? I want to be in service of my partner's desires, but I am not beholden to them. So there's nuance and practice there that I think is really important. I want to talk really briefly about what is the erotic. I taught a whole class about this. There's a whole workshop about the erotic within on my Patreon. I definitely invite you to check it out. And I want you to, in the West, especially here in the US, we really think of the erotic as sex. But it is so much more than that. The erotic is really like this life force within, right? It's energy, it's vitality, it's aliveness. And Esther Perel is a really fabulous and very famous therapist, really talks about eroticism as being like this creative life force energy. And in her cute little French accent, it's the aliveness, it's the vitality that keeps us connected. So you are an erotic being, no matter where you are right now, no matter your relationship status, no matter what's happening in your body. You are an erotic being simply because you are in your own body in this moment of force of nature. It is in you, and yet most of us are cut off from this. Most of us operate kind of from here up, and when we start to embrace our erotic selves, we really have to work at like basically shoulders down, and how do we connect our heads and our beautiful, alive human animal bodies. So no matter what kind or how much of sex you're having, no matter how much or what type of masturbation you do, no matter who you love or fuck or marry, you are an erotic being right now. And this connection to your sacred self is how you can turn kind of mundane sexual experiences into something that is more deeply alive and deeply flowing. I think of it as a river that we can step into, right? And we can step into it and like ignore the current and just kind of stand there and, be in our heads and be focused on work and be, focused on just like getting through the day, or we can let ourselves flow into the current. And sometimes if we can let ourselves flow, we can be in whatever it is. So we can go through our lives not tapped into our erotic selves at all. We can go through it not paying attention to it, even if we have a super wild and playful sex life, right? So it's an it's a thought, it's a feeling, it's an awareness of who we are as sexual beings, not just the sex itself, right? It's not just doing the sex. So if you can imagine like a scenario where, it's the end of the week and you're super tired, but you haven't had sex with your partner in a week or a month or maybe longer, you feel like, okay, like I should do this, right? Should is not a great word when we're talking about sexuality. And you go through the motions, but maybe your heart isn't in it. Maybe your whole body isn't in it. Maybe you're not even that turned on. Maybe you're just checking something off a to-do list, or doing it in service of the other person and kind of suffering through it. That is not going to be an alive, erotic experience. That's not going to make you want more sex with your partner either. So I invite you to think about your current sex, your current masturbation, and notice which one of those, certain days of the week, certain times of the month, certain partners, which ones have that sense of aliveness, that sense of vitality, and which ones feel a little bit more like, oh, I'm just like banging one out to go to sleep, or I'm just doing something to check something off a list. And when we start to notice where that aliveness is missing, that's where some of these skills can come in. So I want to pause for a second and drink some water and also check in with Christopher and see if you want to add anything. I am going to mute myself and try and mute my computer. So we'll see if that works a little bit better.
Hi, all. So a couple of things to highlight that Andrea has brought up. So as we talk about sexual practice, there are going to be two elements to focus on. And within these elements, there'll be layers. So before it gets overly complicated, because it can, we want to stay with the basic idea that for partnered sex, even if it's with more than one partner, we have to be able to go into ourselves to be a great lover, right? So you go into yourself and then you attune to the partner. You go back into yourself, then you tune into your partner, and it's a dance and it's a flow, right? So she's talking about this and she's talking about some of her personal experiences, some general experiences of women that I can certainly validate from working with women in my practice. And I will say this as a man who is also an abuse survivor, that in the sexual realm, in the erotic realm, it's not just women who have been hurt, it's men too. So as we go forth for sex for pleasure, remember that's what we're talking about, sex and eroticism for pleasure, it is really important to know ourselves and then to know our partners. And if just take a second to reflect in your sexual experience, how well do you know yourself? Would it be very well? Kind of a little bit? Maybe not at all? And again, just, not for public consumption. Don't have to put anything in the chat, just in your own heart. How well do I know myself? And for those of you with partners, as soon as you have that answer about yourself, that's for all of us. For those of you with partners, then ask the same question. How well do I know my partners? Right? And there's no wrong answer. If you come up and say, I don't know myself very well, or I have a new partner and I don't know them very well at all, that is absolutely okay. It's just the knowledge that I am just learning myself, or I'm a master at my own eroticism, but I'm brand new with this new person, right? It's not wrong to be new. It's not wrong to not know, but it's important that you're aware of yourself and your knowledge of your partner. So there is that duality. And we're going to get deeper into how do we use these different skills. But remember, you're going to use them twofold. Use them for yourself and then attune to the similar skills with your partner, right? So it is this ebb and flow. So, and again, don't beat yourself up. Just be aware and be kind. Okay.
Okay, fabulous. I guess if I mute myself and then also mute my computer, then we don't get any echo. Nobody chatted about it, so hopefully we figured it out. Good job. Thanks, babe. I also want to say extra super thank you because Christopher seems to have caught himself another cold. And so he's working through this from a hotel, from the cold, with a cold, and still loving me by being present and awesome in their workshop. So thank you, my love.
Can I add something?
Yes, one moment.
Okay, so Andrea, first of all, you're more than welcome. This work is my calling. I wish I had had this information, gosh, 30 years ago. The best time to get it is today. The best time to get it for me would have been 30 years ago. The second best time is today. So I'm happy to share. And as Andrea's talking about, yeah, I got sick. Okay, and so I got sick, and I was around family members who were also sick with something else. Right. And it was really, really a valuable reflection that I got from a colleague because I complained to this colleague and I said, my erotic self is just offline. And my colleague said to me, well, of course your erotic self is offline, Christopher. You in your family, you're dealing with issues of illness and survival. Okay, so remember what I just said about being aware of self? Like I was a little bit down on myself for not being more erotically alive during a vacation holiday week. But I had sort of fallen down on awareness, right? So this is a sex therapist nerdy thing. Sexuality is not a drive, it is a motivation system. And if you have issues of survival or illness in your own self, in your own life, or in your own family, necessarily, evolutionarily, your erotic motivation system is going to take a back seat to issues of survival. So again, when I talk about know yourself, it's not even know yourself only in this kind of identity sort of way. It's know yourself in the current circumstance because they both matter. So that's a good example. Like I'm not feeling great, so I'm not so erotically alive. Does that mean, oh my God, I do this for a living and I practice all these skills? Does that mean I've lost everything? No, it means you're sick, and it means you're sick. And when you have to take care of yourself in those basic drive kind of ways, hunger, illness, drink, water drinking, liquid drinking, that sort of thing, those are always going to take precedent over motivation systems. So again, know yourself generally in terms of identity, but know yourself in terms of your current circumstance too.
Thank you. Yes, so it's been an interesting month for us. And, again, we both talk about sex kind of all day and with each other, but also for work. And it's been kind of in the idea of ebb and flow. Like it's been a real ebbed month for us. We're buying a house, we're traveling, we're visiting family, we're dealing with grief and potential death and sickness. And it hasn't been the sexiest month for us. And also, like, knowing that there is this natural ebb and flow through any long-term partnership helps me understand, like, it's okay. We're not going to lose this, right? And for you, Christopher, you say, my erotic self is offline. And for me, I say, like, I'm not in the flow of it, right? Like, I can't, for me, it's like I like to use nature metaphors. And it's like I'm not able to be in the flow of the river because I'm literally trying to survive this circumstance and this really tough month and deal with these big picture things. So if you are also in an ebb, just give yourself some grace, and just know that even the sex coach and sex therapist have our own ebb and flows as well. Okay, so here are what I call my 6 foundational erotic embodiment skills, right? So back to the embodiment of like knowing yourself. So like Christopher was just saying, knowing yourself, like, yeah, like shit's happening. Of course, my erotic self is offline. That's part of it. And part of it is knowing how to work with your body. And I just want to again focus on this idea of remember that your sexuality is a gift. Your sexuality has the potential to be deeply healing for lots of people, especially those of us that have been harmed, and that it is ultimately your responsibility. Your sexuality, your desires are your responsibility. We do not make other people responsible for it. So, as we think about those kind of underlying ideas, the 6 skills I want you to walk away with today are stillness. So, stillness might not seem initially like it makes a lot of sense when we talk about lovemaking, because I want to do this, or I want to do this position, or try this thing, or do this action. But actually, when we slow way down and be very still, that's when we can make space for some of these underlying things to emerge, right? Somebody just wrote that we have some static. Sorry, we're at a hotel. I don't have any way to remedy that. Hopefully the recording will come out really well. Also check your emails. All of this will be in an email in a couple of days. So this idea of stillness means while you're making love, if you're having intercourse, can you stop moving and just be with each other? When you're masturbating, can you slow down and be still in your movement and just feel the energy moving in your body? Can you be still enough to let those big feelings emerge? That stillness and that holding, if you are offering that to another person, is so incredibly powerful. This is especially delicious as a woman who mostly has sex with a man, that when he can slow down and stop moving and just be like, oh my God, it is one of the sexiest things. related to that, I want you to slow down everything, and then slow it down again. Whether that's touching someone, whether that's kissing someone, whether that's making love, whether that's going down on someone, whatever you're doing, slow it way down. Does this mean you can never have a hot quickie in the kitchen like we did a few weeks ago? No, obviously. Great. Yes, do that. But also give yourself this practice of slowing way down. This is, I think, especially good as we train ourselves in our own self-pleasure and masturbation practices. So many of us, for lots of reasons, move through masturbation really quickly. And again, nothing wrong with that. Sometimes you just need the quick buzz or the quick, bang one out in order to go to sleep or get back to work or whatever it is. Great. Please keep doing that. I'm not here to tell you to stop. But I also invite you to experience very slow self-pleasure. This would be a practice called edging. And I have lots of different resources, especially for people with penises, to learn to practice edging in order to build your capacity for holding arousal so that you can not only last a lot longer, but also learn to have non-ejaculatory orgasms, which means you can become multiply orgasmic as a person with a penis and continue to pleasure yourself and or pleasure your partner. And if you really want to keep doing the work, learn to have energetic orgasms where you're actually not having the kind of traditional pelvic floor response and or ejaculation. So lots of magic awaits. The third erotic embodiment skill is to be present. And these are all related, right? So being present is that if I start to cry during sex, which sometimes happens because I'm in my feelings for whatever reason, that he's not gonna just rush through and just like want to get off because that's what we started doing and now he's mad and we can't finish the way he wanted to. Being present is also like stopping, slowing down, checking in. How are you? Like that looks like it's uncomfortable. Do you want to talk about what's going on or do you want to keep going? Because sometimes when I'm crying, when it comes up during sex, I want to stop. And sometimes when I'm crying during sex, I want to keep fucking. I want to keep moving through it, right? So we're present, we're still, we're aware, we're open to whatever might come up, and we're not trying to change it. And I'll talk more about presence in a few minutes because there's a couple of other things I want to focus on that. The fourth one is to be giving. Be generous in your gifts with your mouth, with your fingers, and with your body. The corollary to that is to be receptive, right? We talked about this a little bit. There is such a beautiful balance in with your beloved. Um, how can you practice being very giving and totally being in their pleasure and focused on what they want and be in service of their eros, right? So again, like I am not responsible for his sexual energy or his desires or his sexual needs, but I love him and I want to be in this dynamic, erotic relationship with him. And therefore, I want to be in service of his sexual energy. Not all the time and not in all the ways, but there's like a dance there of like, when am I in service? When am I giving myself over or giving to him as a gift? The other side of that is learning to be really receptive. And as I said in the beginning, most of us have a hard time with this. Maybe 1, 2% more. My men that I work with have a very hard time receiving because they have been taught and been trained in certain ways that like to be a man and to be a masculine lover is to give and do and perform and show up in these very specific ways. And you may not know how to slow down and receive. And receiving could be as simple as like letting your lover massage you or letting your lover kiss you really slowly. It could mean letting them be in service of you, right? And it could also mean on a more kind of erotically charged level, like learning how to receive sex and touch into your body. So like exploring anal pleasure as a man is kind of the ultimate way to practice receptivity, trust, vulnerability, openness, slowness, all of that stuff can really people with penises can really gain like a felt sense of the intimacy of letting someone or something into your body. It's kind of like the ultimate receptivity experience. is it gives you this deep empathy for what people with vaginas experience during sex and pleasure, and also can just be super fucking fun. So there's that part of it too. It's not just an experiment in empathy. It's really wildly, deliciously fun. Um, the sixth one, the sixth erotic embodiment skill is to be skillful, right? I want you to understand how your body works. I want you to understand why the prostate does what it does and where it is and how to access it. I want you to understand the clitoral complex and where it is and why it's so important and how to access it and how to really turn on your person with a clitoral complex. I want you to understand different skills and different ways to play, whether you like kinky play, whether that's impact or rope or like dominant submissive dynamics. All of that are skills to be learned. You're not born knowing these things, right? Whether it's understanding your erotic blueprints or understanding tantric skills building, like all of these things are skills to learn along the way. And for so many of my clients, especially my couples that come in, that willingness to learn is one of the key factors to success in a long-term partnership, right? If one partner, and I see this quite often, one partner is like stoked, they want to learn all the things, they want to try kink, they want to try tantra, they want to learn the breath work, and the other partner's like, nah, we're good. Like, I just want to have sex 3 times a week and like call it good. That dynamic is going to be pretty tricky, right? Because if we assume sex is the same as it was when we first started dating or as it was when we were 25, we're going to really lose out on that erotic expression. We're going to lose access to our energy bodies. We're going to not build our skills, and we may end up lovers off. And also just knowing that our bodies are going to change over time and knowing how our bodies are going to change over time, super important for all bodies. So being skillful and on with an ongoing learning kind of mindset is one of the best things that you can do for your erotic self. So I'm again going to pause, see if there's any questions in the chat, and Christopher, see if you want to add any.
Hey, y'all. So, a couple of things. First of all, if you have one of those skills that you want to hear more about, put it in the chat. And because she and I can riff on all these things, and I have a bunch of thoughts on them, but they're mine. We're more interested in what your curiosities are. That being said, while I give you a minute to, just put the skill in the chat that you want to hear more about, the one that stood out to me is receptivity. And I want to say to my trauma survivors out there, remember, we're talking about how to be aware of yourself. And so I'll speak for me. As a trauma survivor, the first thing I had to do to learn to be receptive was to learn to say no. To actually know this is touch I don't want or I'm not ready for, right? Because even now, like Andrea could come in and go for my nipples, and if it's right at the beginning, it's too sensitive, it's too much sensation, and it's a red light for me. I have to say stop. Right. But if it's into a longer session and I have a lot of arousal built up and a lot of desire built up, all of a sudden my brain, which processed the same sensation as a stop at the beginning, is go, go, go. Right. So oftentimes, if you're working on receptivity, the way to start is to say no, but then hold some possibility in your own heart or in your own genitals, and we'll get to that in the mindfulness exercise that I'm going to lead you on. Hold space, ideally in your head, your heart, and your genitals, that touch may become available to you later in the session, later in the month, later in your life, right? So it is this dialectic of know your nose and be open to evolution as you go on this journey. For me, it was a journey of recovery. And now I've kind of gotten into that U-shaped curve where I've gotten into a lot of recovery from trauma, and now I'm exploring pleasure. So again, things for me that I would have said no to a year ago, absolutely hard limit, are now actually curiosities that I'm open to. But nobody rushed me into that. I did that on my own. And that was really important for me to take charge of that narrative that I really get to decide. So for the receptive folks, sometimes learning no's is the way to start there.
Yeah, that was very much my experience too, especially as we started exploring non-monogamy, which we have been non-monogamous from the beginning. And learning how to say no to encounters that I just didn't want or people that I wasn't interested in was super powerful. And we've really made space for both of us to practice saying no, but also practice hearing no, because sometimes hearing no can be really hard with your person. So I want to address the chat because there was a couple of questions that came in. So somebody asked, I'm curious about accessing the prostate. Oh, yes, thank you. I love talking about this. So the prostate, I'll give like a little explainer and then please reach out for any additional questions. And I will also share a link to um, some content that I've created around anal sex and anal play. So just know this is the teaser, just the tip, if you will. And there's a lot more to be said. So the prostate is an organ found in the body of people with penises. It is a gland about the size of a walnut, and it creates the seminal fluid that comes out with the ejaculate. So the testicles create the sperm, they create the swimmers, moves in, gets mixed with a bunch of liquid from the prostate, comes out as ejaculate. So if you have a vasectomy, which my partner does, thank goodness, the sperm is still being made, but it's cut off, so it doesn't access the portal that then comes out. I don't have my puppets today, so I can't show you any anatomy. But the prostate is this very functional organ, very functional gland, excuse me, but it also creates a lot of pleasure. And in people with penises, it can be known as the P spot. So people with vaginas, we have a G spot, which can create a lot of pleasure in us as well. And to access the prostate, two ways. One is a little bit easier than others. One is accessing it through the perineum, which is the area between the testicles and the anus. If you press up a little bit, that might be a really delicious spot for your partner to explore. Use some lube and you can press pretty hard into the perineum, also called the taint. And that's one way to kind of start to stimulate the prostate. But the best way is actually accessing the prostate through the anus. So this is why if you have a penis and you go to the doctor, they stick their finger up your butt because they're checking your prostate. That's not as fun as when you lube it up, warm up your body, and start to explore prostate pleasure. So some people like it, some people don't. Some people like anal penetration and they don't like prostate pleasure. So lots of different ways to explore anal play. But if you reach into the anus, it's about as long as middle finger, depending on your partner's body. And I know for Christopher, he has to be really aroused for me to actually feel it. So you can kind of feel it through the lining of the rectum. Feels again kind of like a walnut, so kind of bumpy. And some people like it kind of like doorbell, like tap, tap, tap. Some people like circles, some people like more stimulation. So you just get to experiment with what your person really loves. And again, prostate's not the only way to experience anal pleasure, but it's a really fun way for a lot of people. Anything you want to add, babe?
On prostate play for me, and there was a mention in the chat, somebody has a detailed question, which is very good. So thank you. I'm going to take a piece of your question here and kind of work it into this answer. So when I'm working with clients and I'm working myself, I try to think in three metaphorical areas. I try to think of head, heart, and cock for me. I'm cisgendered, male identified human. And a penis owner. So I tend to think, but again, I try to generalize head, heart, genitals. But I'll stick with me for a minute. So for me, head is what are the stories, the sex scripts, the automatic thoughts that I have, right? And sometimes they're really, really sex negative. The person who asked the question in the chat is sounds like and looks like rather is recovering from purity culture. A lot of guilt, a lot of shame for sex related activity. For me, it was sex related activity that was for pleasure. Sex for procreation was okay, but sex for pleasure was not okay, right? For me. So what I want to know, so the big story that came up in my head when Andrea or anybody else would explore prostate play with me, does this make me gay? Right? That's the thought, right? And I'm a straight identified male and my orientation is straight. And so, oh my God, what does this mean? And I have this whole story about it that's in my head. So I really had to deprogram that. And that was a little bit of a process. And I had help with it. I had help, professional help with a sex therapist who I still work with. So that was one of the things. Then there emotionally in my heart, what would come was like, oh no, like danger. Like, am I going to get hurt? Is this going to be safe? Am I going to get injured in some way? So even that, you hear the story, right? Am I going to get injured? That's a thought. But the emotion that came up was fear. So to unpack all of that to be receptive anally for me has been the work, the sexual work of my life, because what actually happens when I unwind the thoughts and the negative emotions that were not mine, but were from other people, systems, family, that sort of thing, then my body has known more pleasure with anal reception than it has with any other sexual activity. Right? So think about that. What stories and what emotions, legacy emotions, are blocking you from the pleasure that your body was built to experience? Because that's the tip, everybody. The pro tip is that your bodies are meant for pleasure. My body is built for pleasure. So is yours. But we're never told that explicitly. If you don't take anything else out of today, your body is built for pleasure. But what are the stories? What are the emotions that are blocking that pleasure from being felt fully in your body? So that's what I would add to that. That there's, for me, yes, there's all the technical stuff that Andrea said, which is great, and I'm glad she knows it. But for me, I had to unwind a lot in head and heart to receive.
Thank you. So great questions. I love the questions in the chat. Both of the questions about oral sex for women and then also the conscious non-monogamy are slightly beyond the scope of this workshop. I love the questions. So what I will do is take the questions and turn them into video responses on Patreon. So I want to finish the kind of rest of the agenda. And then if we have some time at the end, I can address them there, or we can address them, and or I will create a video response because they're great questions. And I love talking about all of those things. So thank you for those who asked them. And I want to kind of stick to my agenda. So, all right. So we talked about this a little bit in the beginning, and I want to talk about what I think are the ways to become a masterful lover. I love this phrase. To me, just like the phrase is super sexy. And lots of ways to do this, right? The three that I'm going to offer you today are with presence, which we talked about a little bit, breath, and sensation. So when I think about presence, again, we're talking about like you are holding space for me. Holding space means you're not over talking, you're not oversharing, you're not talking, you're not listening, just waiting to talk, right? It means that you can be in your own self in this moment while I'm having big feelings, or in big expression in some way, whether that's, I'm sobbing hysterically and you can just hold space for that. Or whether I'm in like really deep, wild pleasure, you can hold space for that and kind of not make it about you, right? This is a skill to practice with your lovers for sure, but also with your friends and your family and your coworkers. Like being present is a gift that you offer people, and you can use lots of different ways to get there. Mindfulness skills, you can use, if you have a meditation practice that helps you feel a little bit more centered, a little bit more grounded, that will help with your presencing. And the other thing I want to offer around presence is, excuse me, really becoming a very good listener. This again is a skill to learn. And so one of the ways that I think is really helpful is to practice reflective listening. If you're not familiar with this means that if I'm talking with you, oh, I want to tell you about this amazing trip that I went on and I met these cool people, but this part was hard for me, then the person I'm talking to would say back, like, oh, I hear that that was really hard for you. Tell me a little bit more, right? Like they're reflecting back what I am saying, not just, again, waiting for themselves to talk. Another big part of this, and the more I do this work, the more generalizations fall away. And I often hear this from women with male partners, obviously not exclusively, is the non-defensiveness. Like allow your person to have their big feelings and do not make it about you. Let them have their big feelings. Don't take it personally. And know that like they might be stressed out about work or about traffic or about, impending political doom. And that's not about you, right? So, how do you hold space for their feelings without turning it inwards on yourself or taking away kind of their emotional power by then having to have them caretake you? The other thing is don't fix it. And, it's really a magical experience dating a therapist in lots of ways. And it's one of the things that I really wanted out of a partnership because he really calls me on my shit. He was really in his feelings a couple of weeks ago and I was trying to fix it. And he said, like, I don't want solutions. And I was like, okay, yeah, got it. Listening, listening, reflective listening. And then later he was like, no, I really don't want solutions. Like, don't try and fix this. Like, just let me have my feelings, right? So even again, for those of us who are, experts in this work, like we could still use a little bit of reminders to like, don't fix and don't rescue, and to really let people have their experience. And one of the ways to do that is presencing, right? So I think most of the kind of presence in lovemaking that's so important comes back to those embodiment skills, right? Do I know what I'm doing and how my partner likes it? Do I know how to slow down? Do I know how to be still? Do I know how to hold space for them? And it means really being in the moment, right? Again, if we start lovemaking, and one of the phrases he uses a lot with us is, this is a good off ramp for me, right? Maybe we're playing for a half an hour or, an hour, and I maybe disappear for a little bit. I like go into my head for a moment, or I can feel my body is kind of tired, or I'm less aroused. Like he can notice that and say, like, are you done? Like, because I could be done, right? So it's being with whatever is happening and not feeling like, oh, like I need to, we said we were going to have sex and therefore we need to have sex this certain way. So like that special skill is also a really beautiful part of presencing, is again holding your own, knowing that your partner's having their experience and you can be with that, even if it's not your ideal outcome. The second part of this that I think is super important, and I want to make sure we have time for Christopher's practice, which will focus more on this, is really understanding that breath and really good breath consciousness is one of the best things you can start to practice in order to become a really deeply masterful lover. So, in our tantric class that we teach often in person and sometimes online, really learning some foundational breath skills where you are breathing together, where you are breathing asynchronously, and learning how to breathe more deeply into your own body in order to expand your own sensation and pleasure and turn on. The breath offers us so many different gateways into deeper arousal. And our favorite teacher slash marriage coach talks about, she says this phrase where she says, like, are you having the best sex of your life because you're breathing so deeply? Or are you breathing so deeply because you're having the best sex of your life? How do we integrate and weave in the breath to help increase our experience and also bring our focus into the moment? The other part of this is sensation experience. So, lots of good questions, lots of good stuff. I'm not going to lead you through a practice, but I will send it to you in an email. That's a pleasure mapping practice. So, again, most of us learn to masturbate very quickly, very quietly, usually in silence and hidden. So, learning how to not only take your masturbation practice away from that kind of quick, goal-directed, just bang one out kind of idea, but also learning to engage the rest of your body. Christopher's example of his nipples is a great example. Knowing that his nipples are so extremely sensitive means that that's an add-on to the genital stimulation that he may be experiencing. Sometimes it's a singular sensation. You can absolutely learn to have nipple orgasms, to have ear orgasms, to have breast orgasms by paying attention to your breasts. You can have anal orgasms and P-spot orgasms. So just taking the sex focus away from our genitals, like yes, loving on and touching our genitals, absolutely. But how do we then take a break? Touch our nipples, take a break, nibble on our ears, take a break, explore the rest of our skin. Literally every cell in your body is wired for pleasure, and most of us just stick to the genitals. So when we start to, you know, diffuse that focus a little bit, and then you start to add some deep breathing and your partner's super present, like, ugh, that is the deliciousness. So the pleasure mapping exercise I'll send to you invites you to explore a bunch of different tools from around the house, what we would call pervertibles, right? So maybe that's a hairbrush or a fork or some sort of like a feather duster or something. How do we explore these different sensations on our whole body? A hairbrush, obviously great for my wild mane, but it also feels super good when I drag it on my arm and it can add a really cool type of sensation. So we can start to question what feels good in our whole body. And this is super good for solo play. So if you are not partnered right now, if your partner is not available, or if you choose not to have a partner, like this is just as important to explore solo as it is to explore with a partner. And in fact, with a lot of my people, I invite them to really explore this on their own first so that you can become your own best lover. This helps you practice the skills, helps you practice the presencing and the slowing down and the attention and the embodiment, helps you practice the breath and so much more that then you can take into a partnered experience and create something really magical together. So I want to stop here again and see if there's any questions. And then, Christopher, would you like to guide us through like a 10-minute practice after that? Okay, so is there anything in the chat that we need to address or anything you want to add?
There are a couple of things just because I see stuff in the chat and I want to give some information. So on and this is more of what Andrea and I have experienced in our sexual dynamic, but also what I advise my clients on who are polyamorous or ethically non-monogamous and who are trying to incorporate thirds and fourths and more. What I usually say to folks is, are you good at one? Are you good at two? And if you're good at one, yes, great, awesome. Remember, that's awareness of what of myself, right? I can be aware of my desires, my limits, my body, my thoughts, my feelings, my wants, right? And I'm good at two. I can attune with the other. Now I'm going to bring in a third. There really is something about being broad enough, a big enough container to hold more than one partner. So there is something to this, right? So what I usually say to my folks is if you're not good at two, don't try three yet, right? Let's get good at two, right? And everybody do what you want. I mean, I'm not here to be the E&M police at all, right? If you want to run into it, great. But it is going to be complex, right? I mean, just think about it energetically. If I don't know myself and I bring in a partner, oh, for me, the biggest trigger with a partner is laughter because I have a whole story that they're going to laugh at me. And I have some lived experience when I was younger where people did laugh at me while things were happening to me. Right. So I know that about myself. I've got that trigger. I know how to not over respond to it in the present with a loving partner who's laughing because she's having a good time. Y'all think about the screw up of that, right? Like if I code laughter is negative and she's having an amazing time and starts laughing and I'm all, back into my past and, misinterpreting that laughter. Well, now I just haven't pulled myself out of it. I've likely pulled her out of it. So, okay, so now I bring in a third person. It's just another set of triggers, right? I mean, so that would be my advice there, just on a high level on E&M stuff. It's a little bit different if you're playing, with a partner with somebody versus playing solo. You've got a primary partner, but you're dating somebody else solo. That's still being good at two, even though it's two different people. I'm talking about when you're going to bring more than one person into a session, right? Now you're going to have a lot of energy. You're going to have a lot of cues. You're going to have a lot of stuff going on, your own and theirs. So I wanted to add that piece. There was something else, Andrea, that you said that I thought was really important. We had a couple of folks, and I had a great response from the person who asked the question about is recovering from purity culture, saying the phrase that my body is made for pleasure is terrifying. Okay, so again, kind of like laughter for me was like this terrifying, shameful trigger. Like just the fact that you know that and can recognize that and you have that awareness is really, really important. So really good at being attuned to yourself here in this moment when we're talking about sexually relevant stuff. Now, how you unwind that is its own journey, but your awareness of it is really great. In the same way, when Andrea and I very cavalierly talk about solo sex or masturbation, y'all, I mean, you talk about masturbation. I mean, this is sexual experience that by its design is impossible to procreate. So this was a target for a lot of systems to tell us that's bad. Right. And so when we say that very cavalierly, how's your solo sex practice? How's your masturbation practice? It might do this to you. And that's okay. That's normal. That's just a product. Remember, I said at the beginning, those of you who were there, I was trained in a culture that is puritanical and splits off sexuality from regular life. It damn sure split off masturbation, which meant when I did it, starting at the age of 13, just like Andrea is saying, I needed to do it quickly and quietly. And I tell my people in my practice that how you masturbate is going to be how you make love to a partner. Right. So I made love to a partner very quietly, and my body came really fast. Ian Kerner has a great line in She Comes First, highly recommended classic book for sex therapists. He says, Confessions of a Premature Ejaculator. Hey, me too, Ian. So again, for me, I have a lot bound up about masturbation in the way I think about it. I don't like it. It brings up some disgust for me. But when I think about it as a practice that I do to bring myself as a better lover to my partnered sex, ooh, all of a sudden masturbation becomes a lot more interesting to me. Right. So that's what we're talking about know yourself. Like, what are the stories you have around this? And sometimes it's no, you literally can't stop those neural networks from firing. Like I'm gonna have that kind of yuck response to masturbation because that's the way I was raised, but I don't have to over respond to it. And I can think about it in a new way that makes it actually interesting, fun, right? And sometimes when I'm in it, and now I'm talking from my wanting, I'm going to have to touch myself for a while and have some yuck responses and not over respond to them to get through those, to get to the pleasure of it. And for me, in a context that this is going to make me an even better partnered lover for Andrea or any other partners that we bring in, okay, y'all, there's a story I can get behind. So, what's the story you can get behind about any of this stuff? So, I wanted to add that, Andrea. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's great. Thank you for adding all of that. I wrote in the chat, you can't sprint by yourself in your masturbation practice and then expect to run a marathon with a partner, right? So your masturbation practice can become your training for partnered lovemaking, whether that's the next day or later in the evening with your existing partner or in 6 months or a year when you meet somebody new that you want to get naked with. I want to make space for about a 8 to 10 minute practice. Babe, are you feeling good enough to lead that?
Yes.
Okay. Do you want your phone for a timer or do you want me to just set a timer?
Would you? Yes.
Yeah, I'll just set a timer.
Thank you.
All right, folks, enjoy. And um, I'm just gonna leave it to you, babe. I trust you. Go for it.
Okay. First of all, the first rule in any session with me is just because somebody with a bunch of letters after their name suggests something, asks something, or does something, does not mean that you are obligated to follow. So this is an invitation, not an obligation. So what I'm going to guide you through is something that I do for myself to help me know me. Right? Remember, in a partnered sexual experience, and even in a solo sexual experience, knowing yourself is the first job. So, this is a practice that is designed to help you know yourself in this moment, nothing more. We're not trying to change anything, we're not trying to interpret anything, we're just trying to build awareness. So, I invite you to think about the next 6 minutes or so from the position of an observer. An observer. Remember, this is a solo practice. If it was a partnered practice, I would add in a secondary role, which would be a narrator, right? So that's a different set of skills. Right now, we're just observing. When you're with a partner, I want you to observe yourself and narrate what's happening internally to your partner or partners, right? But today we're just going to work on the observing part. And we're going to observe from three different areas. And if you jump ahead and you get to cock or pussy before I get to it, that is fine. You're not doing it wrong. If you start with some emotions or your heart, and that's what you observe first, great. You're not doing it wrong. I tend to start head first because I work down the body from the top. So I tend to think about, hey, what am I thinking? What am I feeling? What am I sensing? Okay. And in my practice, oftentimes we mistake emotions, heart, for thoughts. How are you feeling today? Oh my God, I can't believe that person cut me off on my way to your office today. Okay, that's not a feeling, everybody. Hey, what are you feeling in your body? Happiness? Oh, that's not a sensation, everybody. So oftentimes emotions get confused for sensations and thoughts get confused for feelings. So that's what we're doing for the next few minutes is I invite you to take a deep breath with me. And what I would like you to do is only work on making a noisy exhale. That's all I want you to do. Another noisy exhale, please. Now, keep with the noisy exhales of any volume. Can't do it wrong. And try to notice, observe what you're thinking as you do a noisy exhale. Ah. Ah. I found myself thinking, I wonder if anybody thinks this sounds stupid. I wonder if people can pick up Andrea's noise in the room on the microphone. Oh God, what about the static that's on the call? So these are all thoughts I'm observing. I'm trying to window shop those thoughts. I don't want to buy them, right? Noisy exhale is all I need from you. As long as you're making some noise at all, it can sound like Lam Ra Dum. Or it can just sound like a playful noise. Now observe, are you having any more thoughts? Don't buy them, just window shop. Don't pick up the leaf on the stream. Watch it flow by. Ah. Now stay with your inhale and your exhale. Oh, we're often taught in sex not to make any noise. Don't scare the neighbors. For God's sakes, don't let my parents hear me. Sometimes it's don't let my partner know I'm masturbating. Oh, so some of this is behavioral reconditioning just to make a damn noise while we breathe. Ah. Now, I invite you, while you're still having your thoughts, remember your brain is a word machine. It is designed to generate story. It is designed to tell you something to make sense of what's happening inside of you or what's happening around you. Your brain is a word machine. You're not doing anything wrong by thinking. And I'm going to invite you to focus on your heart as well. What emotions are you having while you do this? Noisy exhale. And again, You can't do it wrong as long as you make some little sound. It can be a small sound too. Ah. Oh. Ah. Ah. I had a thought because I heard somebody leave. I'm like, oh, am I making too much noise? Did I scare someone away? Ah, there's an emotion. I'm scared. I'm scared. Ah. I'm actually having a pretty good time doing this too. That's a story, right? Don't mistake that for a feeling. So, what's the story with having a pretty good time for me? Happy. Ah, I'm pretty happy making these silly noises. Ah, ah. I actually feel a little bit of desire. I'm having a thought. Barbara Carella saying, are you having great sex because you're making this noise? Or are you making this noise because you're having great sex? So Barbara's memory comes back, which is a kind of a specific thought. But I'm happy. Whew. I feel a little desire and I feel a little scared. Ah, okay, finally. Focus on your genitals. Do you feel anything? And if you feel nothing, you're not doing it wrong. What I feel in my body is some real soreness from my butt from sitting on this floor. It's hard. There's story. The sensation is a little bit of discomfort or pain in my glutes, and I feel still kind of excited. In my cock and balls, I can feel a tingling. That's usually the kind of sensation I feel when I'm aware of my genitals. And I'm trying to think, do I want anything right now? I just want to keep that sensation, that energy, that tingling. I don't want to lose it. There's a thought, right? So there's a little fear that I'll lose it and a desire to hold it, to keep it, to make it last. Ah, okay, in the last minute, stay with your noisy exhale and try to observe the three together. What are you thinking, feeling, and sensing? Ah, ah, ah. Oh, okay. For those of you who noticed any sensation that you want to hold, what I'll invite you to do, only if you have a feeling you want to hold. If you want to let it go, do not do this. If you want to hold any of this sensation, I invite you on the next inhale to plant your tongue at the roof of your mouth and then breathe out. Hmm. Hmm. Thank you, everyone. There's our exercise in observing. And I hope it was a positive thing for you. And I know that sometimes it's not. So, whatever it was for you, you're not doing it wrong. Thank you so much.
One of the things I'm constantly reminding Christopher of is the power of his voice and how it feels to hear him and how it reverberates through my body. So I just invite you, if you have a beloved with you or in your life, imagine the power that your voice has on them, whether that's in their ears or across the room. Even across the room, I can feel his voice, feel his energy, and it was definitely very arousing. So you may have heard my giggles in the background as well. This was a live experiment of Andrea getting turned on through breath work.
And just for everybody, like I heard her giggle and I didn't freak out. Like I didn't have any freak out. Like I didn't have any, which is a huge win for me. So for those of you on the, the rewiring your brain and your heart and your genitals journey, like I am, like take the small wins when you notice them, right? Take the small wins. So that's awesome. Yeah, I heard you laughing and I didn't freak out at all. I'm so excited.
So thank you for leading that. For anyone who wants to stay in that energy that it created, whether it was meditative and calming or grounding, or if it was a little bit of a turn on, I invite you to just log off and stay in that energy. I am going to stop the recording now so that we can open it up for conversation, comments, questions. It's 20 minutes after the hour. I'm happy to stay on till 25, I'm sorry, 35 after. Give us like 15 minutes for Q&A. And again, please watch your inbox. I will be sending a collection of delicious emails to you with follow-up readings, videos, resources, all sorts of delicious ways to continue your exploration. Thank you for being here. Thank you for making space in your day, in your life, to do this deeply healing and deeply liberating work. May we all be free in our sexuality. And with that, I'm going to close the recording and open it up for questions.